Welcome to week 7 of 100 Best Artists of All Time. I could try and build suspense, but you've seen the title already. It's the Canadian group Arcade Fire. I say Canadian, but actually key members of the band were from various other places in the Americas. Win Butler, the lead singer, and his brother were both American, from the USA, while Win's wife, Regine Chassan, is from Haiti. As a recording band, they're currently 6 members. When they tour, there's about 9 of them. To tell you who plays what would be complicated, if not futile, because part of the brilliance of the band is the ease with which band members swap instruments. That year after forming, they got a record contract. They formed in Montreal in Canada, and they released the album Funeral in September 2004. It came out a year later in the UK. There was no song actually called Funeral on the album, but the Butlers had just lost their grandfather, Alvino Ray, during the recording process. Alvino had been a professional jazz musician and composer. Good musical blood in the genes. Critical reaction to Funeral was ecstatic. It was deemed Album of the Year by MTV2 and the second best album of the year by the NME. One of the singles from it, Rebellion Lies, was voted the second best single of the year. BestEverAlbums.com rates Funeral as the 9th best album of all time. The recent Rolling Stone top 500 albums only place it at number 250, but that's a problem with Rolling Stone rather than a problem with the album. Arguably, Rebellion Lies wasn't even the best song on the album. I prefer Wake Up, and Wake Up was picked up by U2 as their intro music on their 2005 World Tour. Musicians seemed to latch onto Arcade Fire before the general public did, because David Bowie sought them out and has recorded with them since. They won me over though when they did a live set on one of the smaller stages in a tent at the Leeds Festival one year. They were absolutely superb. I remember they walked into the tent with a mobile drum, like a marching band. Brilliant. With apologies to the likes of Justin Bieber and Drake, they are one of only 3 Canadian bands or artists in my top 100. Start thinking. I'll reveal the others in later weeks. In 2007, in the aftermath of their second album, Neon Bible, Q magazine, the late lamented Q magazine, proclaimed Arcade Fire the most exciting band in the world. In this year, Win and Regine received the ultimate accolade, an invitation to join Springsteen on stage for a couple of songs. The awards and recognition has just kept rolling in. The Suburbs, their 2010 album, picked up a Grammy in 2011 for Album of the Year, and it won a Brit for Best International Album. At the Brits, for good measure, they picked up a second gong, which was for Best International Group. Now, your average viewer of the Brit Awards on British TV didn't really know who Arcade Fire were. Usually these awards go to the household names. Their success caused a Twitter storm both sides of the Atlantic from indignant pop fans who didn't know who they were. Indignant pop fans who showed their lack of intelligence by lack of good grammar. Taking the rip somewhat out of these fans, Arcade Fire released a very successful t-shirt reiterating what had been said about them. Who the fuck is Arcade Fire? My son Matthew wore this shirt, Who the fuck is Arcade Fire? When I was just about 13 or 14, Grandma was not impressed. Nonetheless, they were big enough to be a headline festival band at Leeds and Reading in later years, and the album did make #1 in the US, the UK, and their Canadian homeland. In honesty, the music hasn't been quite as good since those albums. Reflector, which came out in 2013, was a stylistic shift. It was a disco album. Now, I like bands to try and freshen up their sound, change their sound, but the problem is sometimes when bands change their sound, they just aren't to my taste the same thereafter. So none of the songs from Reflector make my playlist. But who cares about my approval when you've got the approval of David Bowie? David Bowie, very much like the band, he did something similar himself, didn't he? Turned from rock into disco and funk after a few albums. I didn't like it when he did it either. But David Bowie actually almost anonymously sang backing vocals on the title track of the Reflector album. Arcade Fire remain in a weird position. They're very well known and respected within the music world, but they are obscure to the general public. For example, they have headlined Glastonbury. But while I've been writing this book, I chanced across an episode of the quiz show Pointless, where out of 100 people, not one single person recognised their music. And as we all know, there is no more scientific barometer of mass public appeal than Pointless. But they're still around. Let's hope that their next album, whenever it is a return to the glory of Funeral and the Suburbs. See you next week.